Hello, class. Welcome to today's lecture on urban growth and management. In this lecture, we'll be talking about how different governments around the world are trying to manage their own cities. But for that purpose, we need to understand terminologies or basic concepts behind what is urbanization, what is urban growth, and what is urban sprawl. And for that matter, we also need to discuss about what is the actual or operational definition of an urban area? How do you classify between an urban area or a rural area? So, in the first section, we'll be talking about some different concepts of urbanization. Now, before that, I'll give you a link to the video. Just look at this video and see how urban centers have emerged all over the world. I'll share the link and then you can watch. Please. Now, you might have seen that how different urban centers have emerged all over this of the world. Some major centers in 2015, in which you've seen that more or less every corner of the world is now almost urbanized. So it's now people also call it as a world of cities rather than a world. So one city itself is a world in which they are competing against other cities. So within a countries, different cities are competing within each other to secure different resources or to best out other cities regarding their own quality of life, maybe better economic growth. So that brings us uh, to the issue of urbanization. Now, UN has now classified that they have published that around 2008 or 2007 the urban population crossed over the rural. So now more people are living in urban areas than rural areas. And what is happening that relatively urbanization relative to human history, urbanization is a new phenomenon. And this transition from urban to from rural to urban has transformed how we live, how we work, how we interact, how we travel, or how we build different networks. And now it is estimated that around 55% of the world population is now residing in the urban areas. And by 2050, it is estimated that around two-thirds of the world population will start living in urban areas. So that if you see the video, you might have seen that over some period of time, some little towns of Asian civilization have emerged in the uh, in the earlier Asian civilization like Mesopotamia, Indus civilization, and Egyptian civilization. So if you have noticed, old cities emerged on the banks of rivers or at the crossroads of important road junctions, transportation network. So agriculture, transportation, that played a very vital role in forming different urban centers around the world. That means from invention of wheel to uh, an influence on transportation, and that will transportation influence on agriculture and how people will transport goods from one place to another. So that kind of dynamics, they uh, provided some incentives for the people to live together in close-knit communities and form population, and that one day could be transferred into an emerging to an urban population. So now urbanization or urban growth, in which you can say different cities of the world have started physically expanding. So urbanization or the urban growth is physical expansion. It's also in terms of spatial analysis, we can say that a city which is growing physically, it's consuming more and more land or more and more built up land is this, we can say the city is growing. Now, uh, is it a bad thing or is it a good thing? The growing of a city or a built up area, is it a good thing or is it a bad thing? Well, it depends upon from which planner's point of view you are looking for. If you are looking from an economic point of view, okay, city size or growth of the city has a potential to attract economic development in a city or an urban center. That would ultimately lead towards better quality of life for the inhabitants. But from an environmentalist point of view, from environment, people would be very much against it. The urbanization is utilizing prime agriculture land in the surroundings, and it is destroying the environment. A sociologist or a social scientist, they will argue that no matter how the city's growth, the quality of life of the people or the security, their social welfare should be enhanced. So for them, urbanization can be positive or a negative word. So what do you call it urbanization? I mean, do we call it a physical build-up of area, or like land reclamation of the sea, or you can say the gradual decrease of green area in a city? Do we call it urbanization, or a rapid built-up growth in different cities of the world? Do we call it urbanization? So therein becomes the words, the different terminologies being used in the world regarding urbanization, urban growth, or urban sprawl. Now, firstly, the first thing which comes to the mind is, what is an urban area? How do you classify an urban or a rural area? How do you differentiate between them? So now, definition of a city, it varies from time to time and place to place. But usually it is in terms of demographics or the population changes. Uh, the United Nations, for example, they do not have any formal definition of an urban area, but it uses definition, official definitions of different countries. For example, United States, for instance, they say that an urban place is that locality in which around 2,500 people live. In Peru, for example, they are not talking about population, they are talking about number of dwellings, the housing units. If it is more than 100, that area is characterized as urban areas. Let's say, talking about some Sweden, for example. Sweden says a built up area with 200 inhabitants or more, and another indicator to add to this, and where houses are at most 200 meters apart. That is like population as well as some density measure. Japan, on the other hand, they classify an urban area as an area which more than 50,000 people live, and around 60% of the population and their houses are located in a main built-up area. So you mean high density area. And third, another indicator they added, 60% of the population is engaged in manufacturing, trade, or any other type of urban businesses. Or in other words, non-agriculture business, non-agricultural employment. So India, similarly, India follows an area which has more than 5,000 people, where 75% of male working population is engaged in non-agriculture pursuits, and an area which have more than 400 persons per square kilometer. So clearly they defined as number of population, the working population engaged in a certain uh, employment like non-agriculture, and the density, 400 people per square kilometer. Other countries like smaller countries like Singapore, it defines all of the population as urban population because it has a small area. And some countries like Myanmar, it does not have any formal definition. In context of Pakistan, we don't have any technical definition, but we officially or legal definition of an urban area is places with municipal corporation, town committee or cantonment. So they define urban area as from an administrative point of view. So generally, overall, if you see overall the context, the urban areas are often defined or classified based on their higher population densities relative to the peri-urban or outskirts or rural areas. Majority of people working in non-agriculture sector or number of population, number of inhabitants, or sometimes even percentage of an area which is not under agriculture cultivation. If the majority of the area in that district, sub-district, municipality, locality, percentage of an area which is not under agriculture cultivation is also classified as urban area. So here built up like kind of a built up environment. So there are some different definitions around the world. Different countries have different definitions. So coming back, we'll talk more about urban growth. So what is urban growth? Urban growth is basically it refers to any type of growth in an environment. It might be socioeconomic growth, it might be physical growth. Most of the time, urban growth or urbanization is are like simultaneously used to uh, stress on positive side of the phenomena. Urban growth sometimes planners mostly use urban growth from a physical point of view, how much a city or a built up area has grown over. So urban growth. Now, urbanization, on the other hand, are defined as an increase in generally it is basically generally it is defined as an increase in proportion of population residing in an urban area in comparison to rural areas, and that also includes natural increase in the urban population, migration from rural areas to urban areas, and conversion of rural or peri-urban areas to urban characteristics based on some definition. Then uh, which leads to the point that why people migrate from rural to urban areas. Well, probably because urban areas tend to have higher living standards, and when people become richer, they tend to move from rural to urban areas. And sometimes in developing countries, people also move to urban areas for economic pursuits or getting better employment opportunities. So that is main crux of migration. Uh, And the last, another thing that then now this urbanization, because of the dynamics of urban growth or population increase, large number of disciplines, it is they are basically working together to achieve sustainable urban development. So different professions like let's say urban planning, architecture, engineering, civil engineering, geographical sciences, economists, and public health. These these disciplines collectively work together to manage urbanization in a better way or in a sustainable manner. Now, this phenomenon is also very closely linked to modernization or industrialization or the different social ecological processes in a city. So different phenomena tend to work in the context of urbanization. So last, another point is the urban sprawl. Right now, there is no accepted definition anywhere, but there are some characteristics of urban sprawl, which is low density, spread or less dense development, especially in the outskirts of the city, is urban sprawl. But most importantly, urban sprawl is basically viewed as a negative word, negative connotation. It implies a negative connotation to the phenomena of urbanization. So a person or a planner talking about urban sprawl is basically talking about some negative aspects of urbanization. And when they are talking about urbanization, so probably they are talking about some positive sides of urbanization. So that basically lead us to the definition of sustainable urban growth. What we want a sustainable urban development even. So sustainable urban development simply can be defined as sustainable urban development seeks to create cities and towns that improve long-term health of planets, human and ecological systems. So Urbanization employs the philosophies of sustainability in the context of maybe human life, like quality of life, standard of living, as well as safety of the ecological systems like environment. So we have to balance out as a planner. We need to balance out how much priority do we should we have on economic development. How much should we prioritize economic development? How much should we prioritize social development? And how much environment should be protected? So that is basically sustainable development. Thank you.